Well, hello there, gunfighters, and welcome to Gunfighter Life. Today we are going to talk about guns that are easily modifiable. Guns that can be switched around by the end user without a bunch of tools. Shade tree mechanic, kitchen table gunsmith, whatever you want to call it. That lend themselves to tinkering. That's what we're going to talk about today on the podcast, where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, the right way with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am going to put in the bio. I know some people asked me to take it out, and I did, and the podcast numbers actually went down, and Patreon membership went down. Now, correlation is not causation, but it certainly didn't help, so I'm going to throw it back in. I'm going to put in an abbreviated version of the bio. It's been a while since I put one in a current recording. So I'm going to throw it in there. If you want to skip it, skip a few minutes and we'll get into the main topic. Blessed to have served in the military, law enforcement, combat veteran, private contractor, competition shooter, lifelong hunter, guide. Blessed by God that He got me through all those things so I could share this firsthand training, knowledge, experience with you to serve you today. Let's dive into the podcast. Now, this is an episode for guns that are easily modifiable by the end user without a bunch of specialty tools, without a garage full of tools. If you have a garage full of tools, that's great, but not everybody does. If you have an arbor press, that's great. But that is not in the spirit of today's episode. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody that can, with a few hand tools, take a certain platform and modify it. One example that would not fit into this would be a 1911. I have spent months and months having my 1911 worked on by a professional gunsmith to get it milled, and myself using hand tools, hand files, hand cutting, hand filing, hammering to get that thing modified the way that I want it. That is not in this episode. There are a ton of 1911s and a ton of 1911 parts out there, and you can get a lot of really cool custom 1911s. They are not easy to work on. You're just swapping out simple things for the end user. For instance, most modern polymer striker fires, you can just swap out a new slide. You can be like, oh, I want this slide, and you can just swap it out. You can't do that on 1911s. It may work, but it's meant to be hand fitted, and that can sometimes require some complex tooling. That's why a custom high-end 1911 costs quite a bit of money. You can get a 1911 that works, or you can get a 1911 that's accurate, but you get one that works and is accurate and reliable, hand fitted, hand tuned. That takes money. Great platform. I love the platform. Not on the table for today's discussion. Just to give you an example. So if you're like, it didn't fit in here. Another example of what not to put on here would be like a Tikka T3 or a Remington 700. Again, if you have a machine shop, you can do all kinds of cool stuff with those guns. But at the table, I mean, you can swap out a stock or maybe a bolt handle or something, but bolt knob or something, but really not a lot you can do. So let's get into what platforms really do lend themselves to this. Maybe the first one you would start off with as a young man or young woman or just a new shooter, the Ruger 1022. One of the reasons it has become the dominant .22 rifle in America, period. There was a long time where it was duking it out with the Marlin Model 60. Now, the Marlin Model 60 is a fine rifle. I'm not here to badmouth it. It's a very good rifle. For some applications out of the box, I would say maybe even superior. But all around, the 1022 beats it, and it did beat it. Now, Marlin had its own financial troubles and things like that and getting bought out. But really, I think one of the main things that helped the 1022 overcome the Marlin is its modularity. For instance, one of the really cool things about a Ruger 1022 is that the barrel takes out with just 2 screws, and it's got like a wedge locking block. You can look it up and easily find a picture. Audio is not the best for everything. But it's got like a locking block that bolts in with 2 long bolts. It is not rocket science. You could literally do it at the kitchen table. It fits handily into today's episode. Not just that, but the trigger mechanism itself. You can work on them, but they pop out with a couple of screws and you could swap them out. You want the bolt to lock back on the last round? Okay. You want it to not lock back on the last round? Okay. You can modify all kinds of stuff. And there's all kinds of broad aftermarket support for it. You want to swap out a stock one screw or maybe a screw and a barrel band. It's super simple. One of the great things about that gun is how it was designed to be easy to work on. That's what I'm talking about in this episode. Ruger 1022. The next one, the AR-15, America's Rifle, Armalite model of 15. Going way back to the 1950s. It's a classic. You might think of it as a new space age rifle. It's from the 1950s. Right? Same year as those classic 57 Chevys. It predates like a 69 Shelby Cobra. It was designed in the 50s. And it has stood the test of time. It is very, very easy to build and work on with a minimum of tools. Try just assembling it from parts. It's so easy. There's literally companies that kind of specialize in just parts kits. I know PSA sells complete guns, but really they sell a lot of parts kits. You can literally, after you fill out the paperwork for the lower receiver, buy a bucket of parts or a box of parts and build your own AR. It does require one or two specialty tools. You can get by without them, but you probably should buy them. But they're simple hand tools. And I would advise you, if you're doing this, at least for your first one, just buy a complete upper. Or even if not a complete upper, buy a barrel and upper that's already put together. That's one of the things that can be a little bit tricky on there, but even that's crazy simple. Like if you can change your brakes on your car, you can probably tackle that. But if you don't want to tackle that, or you don't want anything that might be a safety issue, really just get the barrel that's already properly assembled into the upper, and everything else you can do literally at a kitchen table. You might get frustrated losing some of those really small parts, a rocket ship, a tiny spring, buy some spares, they're cheap. But really, they're so easy to build, and that's one of the things I think that endears us as Americans to them. You're like, oh, I can get this, and then I can get that upper. If you are a tinkerer at heart. If you're not, you can just buy one complete, and they're great like that. But if you're like, oh, I'm doing my door-kicking S.B.R. build, now I'm doing my long-range prairie dog, bull barrel 24-inch, rock chuck deluxe, you can do that. You're like, you know what, I've got this bolt carrier, but I really want a chrome-plated bolt carrier, not just because of the bling, not to give my AR a grill, but because it actually does help. It can help the performance of the gun. Not to mention all the accessories, My service in the military and law enforcement predates even the quad rail when they were in common use. Had some kind of crazy apparatus to bolt our PEC-2s onto the handguards, just the aluminum plastic handguards. But once the quad rail came out, you had a standard Picatinny rail. I remember when that wasn't the standard, but when that became the standard and everybody started making accessories, you could get this company, you could get a Surefire light that mounts on here. Oh, but I want the Pelican. Okay, if it's got a 1913 pick rail adapter, rock on. And then we got even more modular, the M-Lock. There was that whole M-Lock key mod battle, but M-Lock pretty much won that fight. There's all kinds of stuff you can do to snap on accessories. It's like an erector set for grown men. And you can do all that stuff yourself. Don't forget the Loctite, but other than that, rock and roll. Kind of the standard today is not, the carry handle that it originated with, but a flat top upper. Oh, I want to see if I want to run an LPVO or a red dot. Maybe I want to try a red dot and a magnifier. Easy to do. Super easy. There is, who knows the combinations of different AR-15s that you can build. Think of the ARs that I have. I don't know that any of them that I have, anybody else has one just like it. That is what I'm talking about with the modularity, the tinker-friendly nature of the AR-15. It doesn't require an arbor press. It doesn't require you to know how to do rivets like an AK does. AKs are actually kind of hard guns to build. That's why they're kind of expensive now. We don't live in the drunken stupor of the end of the Cold War where, countries were selling off Cold War stockpiles. They're actually a pretty hard gun to build. Look at the price disparity now for a good AR and a good AK. The AR is easy to build and easy to modify. The next one, especially in the handgun world, guys, I don't often give the Glock a lot of love, but I am going to here. The Glock, especially the Glock Gen 3, mostly because the patents expired on that one. So easy to work on. So many companies make them. There are companies that pretty much copy them. They don't have any parts or original Glock parts probably. And they are super modular. Unlike the 1911, right? You can just swap out a slide as long as it's compatible. Oh, you want to try a ported barrel and a ported slide? Okay. You want to drop in a 3.5 ghost connector and a slightly lighter firing pin spring to make an atrocious garbage trigger slightly better? Okay, you can do that. And you can do it with literally a butter knife and a simple round punch. If you know what you're doing, it might take you, 5 minutes to modify the trigger. You don't want to go that route, you can get a whole drop-in trigger. A couple of pins, push them out, you can drop in a whole new trigger. You want to hunt sharks underwater? They make a maritime spring cup. Let your Glock function underwater. There's all kinds of stuff you can do, not just the sights alone available for Glocks. Right? There's lots of guns that you can switch out the sights on. Most handguns you can. But I don't know if any have the aftermarket support of the Glock. The Glocks have so many different options for sights. And so many different companies make them for them. One thing about the 1911, again, I like a 1911, but that's kind of a nightmare. The original ones didn't have, removable sights, only the rear, not the front. And then when they started getting to where you could put better sights on them, there was no real standard. There's the Novak cut, the GI style cut, there's whatever is on mine that is not a Novak front, and I ordered from Trijicon. It was supposed to work, it didn't fit. Not Trijicon's fault, but they didn't even make one for it, so I had to get another front sight and then modify it, because again, a lot of that stuff's got to be hand fitted. You really don't have to worry about that with the Glock. Very few variances, but if we're talking just a straight Gen 3, Glock 19, Glock 17, there are so many sights for that gun. You want an XS big dot, which I would say don't. If you want that on a dangerous game rifle or a shotgun, okay, but on a handgun, I would advise against that. But if you want it, it's there. If you want the diamond sights, which I like, they're there. If you want co-witnesses and a red dot, they're there. Want the old classic 3 dot, you got it. Heck, you want something that has nothing really to do with the function of the gun. You want cool custom back plates. You want a good logo on there. You want a cool design on there. You can get really cool back plates and swap it out again at your kitchen table. You want the "Don't Tread on Me." You want the Punisher. You want the American flag. Right? They probably even make a Canadian one, even though you guys aren't allowed to own guns up there anymore. Not handguns anyway. Not buy them. But you get the idea. They make so many you can even customize the back plate. There is so much aftermarket support, but I don't think it's the most modular or the best to tinker with. I think that has been dethroned by the SIG 320. It takes it to the next level. Because it is a chassis system, because it was designed from the ground up to be that, you could get on SIG's website and you can build. You can order the fire control unit, kind of like the lower in an AR-15, but that whole firing mechanism, you can order that. You can go on SIG's website and you can build what you want. Maybe something completely unique to you. Right from the get-go, right? You don't have to start with a Glock 19 or a clone and then modify it how you want. You can start with this trigger group and build what you want. The one thing you're kind of stuck with the Glock is the grip, the receiver. That is the serialized part, and that has the ergonomics of a 2x4. That's why there's like whole services where you can get that improved because it's so bad. It's like holding on to a 2x4. You can modify that, but that you're kind of stuck with it. Not the 320, right? You don't like, and the 320's got much better ergonomics right out of the box, but even SIG themselves. You want a small grip, you can get it. You want a medium grip, you can get it. You want a large grip, you can get it. You want their competition style grip, you can get it. You don't want to go with SIG, you can go with the Wilson Combat. That's what's on my hip right now. Wilson Combat on the M17 grip module. You mess up your old barrel, shoot it out. There's tons of aftermarket barrels for it. You want a titanium nitride barrel? Cool. You want a full-size grip with full-size magazines? Okay. You want a compact? Okay. Really beats out the Glock in that category. Now, there are some other guns newer to the market that are supposed to be modular with the chassis system, but there's not the aftermarket support. SIG does a really good job of supporting the 320 and the M17, M18, and there's a lot of aftermarket companies that make stuff for them as well. Wilson Combat, Faxon, the Flux Raider. Talk about modular. You want to turn it into a PDW, personal defense weapon with a stock, you can do it. There are some other guns coming out. I hope the Ruger Glock copy, I hope that does well. But right now it doesn't really have a ton of aftermarket support. The SIG 320 does have that. So I think that's probably your best option if you want to tinker and change things around. Now I'm going to go back a bit. The guns I'm going to talk about now, I'm talking about older guns. Although the next one I'm going to talk about is still made. I'm going to tell you, if you're looking for one, get an older one. Get one made in the 90s or before to be safe. And some of the other guns I'm going to talk about aren't even made anymore, period. But the Remington 870, it's been around for decades and decades. Again, I can't in good conscience recommend the new ones, but the old ones are really good. And I love the Mossberg 500s, 590s. In fact, if you're looking for a new pump shotgun today, that's the one I'm almost certainly going to recommend. However, they're not really as modular. And the main reason why is just the way they design the magazine tube and the barrel. Because of the way that the 870 does it, you can easily add a mag extension. Not easy on a Mossberg 500. Your kind of mag tube kind of is what it is on the 500, 590. The 870 is pretty modular, literally easy as, unscrewing a big nut on the front of the magazine tube to take the barrel off. You have your standard 5-round magazine tube, or 5-round capacity rather. You take it off, you can drop your semi-neutered plug in there, because you're way, way dangerous if you're going to hunt ducks with a 5-round mag. But if you got a 3-round mag, you're okay. 3-round capacity is fine. 5 rounds makes you a mass murderer of waterfowl and pheasants, because if you miss them with the first 3 shots, you're always going to get them with the next 2. It is what it is, right? But you can easily do that and drop it on there, and then you want to put on a tactical barrel and you want to put on a plus whatever 2, 3, 4, 5-round extension, you can do that. And there's a ton of other aftermarket stuff for it. I could be wrong about this, but I think even Mossberg makes a Remington 870 barrel. But you can get, iron sight barrels. I'm talking about proper rifle sight barrels. You can get ghost rings. You can get the old classic vent rib. You can just get a bead if you don't care about ever taking it outside. I'm talking about a smoothbore, just a tube with a bead on the front. You can do all kinds of stuff. There's all manner of stocks. There's a fold-on top stock. There's side-folding stocks. Pistol grip, not pistol grip. Classic hunting stocks, wood, polymer, bright orange. Get whatever you want on there. They're really, really easy to work on. Really easy to modify. The next one technically is made, one of the models, but Thompson Center, the Encore and the Contender, I have loved these since I was a kid. I only own one, and it's a 22 long rifle, Thompson Center Contender. It's a beautiful, beautiful single shot pistol. I use it for practicing my pistol fundamentals because it slows me down. Because if I can't shoot good slow, I'm not going to shoot good fast. It's just how that works. I have a single shot break open 22 pistol. That's a lot of fun, but they made those in all kinds of calibers. I'm not even going to list the calibers. But Thompson Center, they recently announced they're making product again. I can't vouch for their new stuff, but their old stuff was world class. If you want to tinker and you want single shots, the Thompson Centers are kind of your way to go. And they made stocks. You can make them into rifles, make them into pistols. I think they won that ATF fight back in the day, so you can do that. You want a shotgun, you want a 22, you want a center fire rifle, you can do that. The Contender is a smaller version, and the Encore is the bigger version. You get up to a certain point, and I don't know what the cutoff is, but I think when you get into like 308, 30-06 territory, you want to go up to the Encore. It's a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, but still a sleek svelte, and I think both of them are beautiful. I think the Contender is one of the most beautiful guns ever made. And you can swap out the calibers. You can swap out from rimfire to center fire. You could, do a 410 shotgun. You could even do a muzzle loader, and you can swap that stuff out. Swap out the stock, swap out the forend, swap out the barrel, swap out the caliber. You want to get a 44 Magnum barrel with a optic to go handgun hunting? Cool. You want to get a 22 barrel for plinking and target shooting? Cool. Oh, you want to do some varmint hunting? Get a 223 barrel. It's a super cool modular system. Again, even muzzleloader. You do muzzleloader, shotgun, center fire rifle. And these were never cheap. These were never ever cheap. Because they were pretty expensive, there was kind of the budget version back in the day. Sadly, they don't make these anymore, but H&R handy rifles. The H&R handy rifle. Now, these were not made to as exact a tolerance. They were kind of a budget gun. There were a ton of calibers available. You weren't supposed to be able to just buy different barrels and swap them out. You were supposed to send it back to the factory, and they would fit it properly to make sure it was safe. If you wanted to, say, take your H&R handy rifle and 243 and make it a 308. You weren't supposed to just be able to buy a 308 barrel and put it on there. I'm not saying it won't work if you know how to do headspace and stuff like that, but they weren't designed that way. But that said, there were a ton of these made for a long time. Not nearly as modular as the Encore, but still, if you want a little fun thing to mess with, if you can find a package deal at a gun show or on Gunbroker, and somebody's got like a 410, 243, 22 long rifle combo, that's like a fantastic, survival starter pack right there. At least for hunting. Still single shots, so you got, rate of fire is very slow, but still, whatever combo you want, right? But like a 22 long rifle and a 308 30-06 and a shotgun, that's pretty cool. So keep your eye out for those. Know that they exist. If you've come into the shooting world recently, those did exist. You can still find them. Anyway, with that, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of highly modifiable, tinker-friendly firearms. Your tactical verse of: Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, and he will have mercy on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. It's why He is God. He is rich in mercy, loving you so much that He gave His Son to die for your sin, not because you are good, but because He is good, for He will abundantly pardon. His ways are better than ours. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.